Ooh. I see you with the whips. The whips reminded me of the I'm talking about the little whip you had in your neck on the sway reminds me of the purple flowy garment that you were talking about from the purple store.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't even
Yeah.
know what I was doing because I was trying to remind myself how to lower the music.
No, been there. That was me last week without you. Welcome back. I said, "Oh,
Thank
it's still at the
you.
same level." Yes,
I
of
was
course.
realizing, like, I don't know the last time I sat in this chair.
Mm,
Because even the last couple of podcasts before the
yeah.
last 2 weeks where I was off, I was not, I don't think I was here. I think I was
Mm-mm.
traveling.
And you know you like your
So,
setup. Welcome back.
right. Thank
Yeah.
you. It feels
How
good to
does it
be
feel?
sitting here. Feels good. I'm grateful, grateful to get back home and be grounded. And I've missed you. I've
Yeah, I
missed
missed you
the
too.
podcast. I've
Yeah.
missed being live, all
Yeah.
the things. And,
I
I
know.
was off for our listeners, taking care of some family business and
Yes.
grateful to be back in ATL and grateful that there's a little hint of fall in the air.
Beautiful. Yes. Football started. The temperatures are changing. It's beautiful.
Right? I
Yeah.
was in Texas when it was 105 degrees.
I've been thinking about you out there in that heat. It's crazy.
Like, it's just rude, Texas. Like,
That's that band
so,
camp weather. Yep.
right. Oh, and I thought about you because at one point I drove by these kids
Mm,
that were on the field getting ready for band camp. I know
yeah.
that's years past you, so
No, I
not
love
to
it.
imply you're a kid, but like
No,
they
I
were high
understand.
school students, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it had to be that day 103 or 104, and they're
Stay
out there in full
hydrated.
uniform. And I was like, oh, I just had such compassion in my heart
Yeah.
because, I was, ooh, yeah,
It prepared me
like,
to be a kitchen manager.
right?
Prepared me for the heat. Yes. That and, doing lawns with my dad, everything. And that reminds me of financial wellness. And that's what we're talking about today. So I'm super excited for you to be back. Excited for episode 130 and to talk about financial wellness.
Right? Should we get our official intro and get this party started?
Let's do it. Hey,
Let's do it.
ladies. I am Shannon Mitchell, a Black millennial, entrepreneur and Amazon best-selling author, the founder of Shalo Glow, an all-natural handmade personal products company that helps women with dry skin glow from head to toe. I'm a champion for your self-care, business care, and intentional wellness.
Hey, y'all, I'm Christine Gautreaux, a white social justice advocate, an international speaker, coach, published Amazon bestselling author, and dancing social worker who helps you upgrade your self and community care.
Yes, together we are a podcast rooted in the 8 dimensions of wellness and the co-founders of Women Connected in Wisdom Community.
And we like to get together every week with special expert guests for intentional conversations about how to be wise in business, relationships, and wellness. And today we're talking about financial wellness.
Yes, so important.
Ooh,
I've been thinking
right?
about your chapter from volume one as we work on the second volume and getting back to the basics, right? What do we know what works? What do we know are the habits? I like to eat out, right? I think about your things that you say, what were you allowed to spend money on when you were little? Yep, food was
Right?
definitely one of
Food
them.
and flowers were two of
Mm-hmm.
the things we were allowed to spend money on. And
Yep,
books. I
and books.
realized books, like when, I was in Texas
Yeah,
dealing with my aunt's estate and things
yes.
like that, books everywhere.
Mm,
And I thought about that too, right? We
yeah.
were allowed to do that. Um,
Were there
yeah.
any books that stood out? I know I have Seven Habits of Highly Effective People below my computer, setting it up, and I think it's one of the books I usually use, and that was from my best friend's mom's house.
I love that.
Yeah, and it was
Well, I
good.
found a book that she had given me before.
Mm,
So one is Well Behaved Women Rarely Make History.
get
And
it?
one was another one that was like medieval well behaved women rarely made history. So I think that one's coming to my collection
Okay,
because it's the history of like women who, were
did
not
things.
staying in their place.
Right, right. Talking about finances, right? I can't wait to have this
Right?
conversation
Right?
because, like, when I think about new things, new logistics, doing things in the business, even for personal. We have a list of new things I'm doing for the first time this year. And financial wellness, I think about Cecile, right? And her
Mhm.
teaching on no blame, no shame, no guilt. So just notice, like, where are you at and why do you have the development that you have? Okay, me personally, it makes sense that if ancestors in the history have been slaves and their bodies were in these books, that maybe you have an emotional attachment to how you feel going through learning the foundation of how it was set up, or how you move the numbers when the numbers are now made of other things to make the business effective, but it still has to be set up in a healthy way. How do you plan for the future and make sure that it's effective? Is why I'm super excited. That question is why I'm excited to talk to our experts, Boo, about planning and being intentional and investing effectively.
I think it's just timely too, because this Saturday is autumn equinox. It's a
Yeah.
new season,
Yes.
and I like to check in with myself and where I'm at on
Mhm.
things at different seasons, right?
Yeah.
So I was looking at that because this year has just been so intense.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I need to take a deep breath, see where I'm at, see, to be grounded in the present and
Yeah.
where we're at. But what do we want to create for the rest of the year? Or what
Yeah.
do we need for the rest of the year?
Right.
As we move towards the holidays, as we move towards, 2024, which is
Yeah.
even shocking to say.
Right.
But it's where we're at. So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, so how do we do this intentionally? How do we
Right.
do it mindfully and in balance with all our 8 dimensions of wellness, right?
Yeah. And like we talk about the work life balance, the quotes like Stacey
Mhm.
Abrams talks about, the Jenga that we use. And that's how I
Mhm.
think about it. This season might be different. We're going into the holidays, so we know we'll probably spend a little bit more, spend more time socially. And we had talked about being ahead. So what if you're not reactive, but you're proactive? I would love in a perfect world, right? And this doesn't always happen, to start organizing taxes in October. Well, what does that look like to be ahead on that, right? What does it look like to be proactive in investing and all this stuff? I'm looking forward to still getting better at it. So this is why I love Women Connected in Wisdom, because when I'm not the expert in all the things, we can call somebody else who has studied,
Right?
tried and true, and figure out what they do for themselves and in their businesses and other businesses that they help.
Well, and in all transparency, when you said that
Hmm.
about the work life Jenga, I
Yeah.
feel like my Jenga is just about to topple over. Like,
Okay.
like I feel
Yeah.
like a good stiff wind could blow it over.
Okay.
So, knowing that and
Yeah.
owning that, like I may
Hmm.
just need to rebuild it, right?
Hmm.
I need to take a deep breath and reassess where I'm at with things because of this
Okay.
last 6 weeks of travel, two of
Yeah.
it being unexpected. So, I think that's normal, like for
It
our
is.
human experience,
Yeah.
and that things pop up that are unexpected, that we didn't know when they were coming, or we didn't weren't able to plan for them. And I
Right.
know with our guests today and our expert guests that there are some things we can plan on. Like there are some things we can do to help lessen of impacts when we have big stuff come up.
Yes.
So should I'm going to tell our guest and our audience what financial wellness, what definition we're going off of from the
Let's do
Women
it.
Connected Wisdom definition. So, y'all, today we're talking about financial wellness. Financial wellness is an intentional approach to your relationship with money as a tool. It includes stability with current finances, increasing positive financial behaviors like budgeting, reducing debt, saving, and investing. Financial wellness incorporates knowledge and skills that helps to change behavior, reduce financial stress, and creation of strategic financial plan to reach desired financial goals, which, woohoo, our expert speaks right to that today.
Right. Yes. So important. So important. What stood out to me is the intentional approach, and it changes, right? It changes based on the season. And sometimes you might feel bad. Like if you're the type of person, I realized I was the type of person where if I knew how to do something, I always did it that way. Right? I could be honest. Yeah, there's multiple ways to count to 10. We can be honest with that. But if I count 5 and 5, I'm doing it 5 and 5 every time. And sometimes the season, you can still be genuine to yourself and pivot in the season so you can be most effective and then pivot back. So I'm excited. Is there anything else that you wanted the two of us to talk about before we bring on our expert?
I'm excited to bring on our expert guest, so I
Okay.
think we do it.
Okay, y'all. So today we have Shinobu Hindert, and she is a certified financial planner, money expert, best-selling author of Investing User Superpower, and creator of Empowered Planning. As a first-generation American, she has firsthand experience navigating the financial industry from a career perspective and personally to build wealth. She spent the first half of her career working for some of the largest financial institutions in the United States, including Smith Barney and Fidelity Investments. As a financial advisor, she created financial plans for high net worth individuals across the United States, overseeing more than 350 million in client assets. Now Shinobu has taken all her knowledge and created a simple, proven method for teaching personal finance. She has delivered over 500 live workshops covering a wide range of topics from budgeting to estate planning. Her goal is to simplify the complex world of money and investing by empowering people everywhere to reach financial freedom. Welcome, Shinobu Hindert.
Thank
Welcome.
Woohoo!
Of
you.
course. Cheers for the 350 million. Yes, for the management, okay? The organization. I love it. How are you?
Good. Yeah, you guys have some dance moves.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice. It's
You got to
fun.
boogie with it a little bit. Yeah.
You talking about that and financial wellness. I have a couple of songs I sing to before I do my finances, sing and dance to. But one of my all-time favorites is Karen Drucker's "Money is Coming to Me Easily and Effortlessly," and she's hysterical. And she sings with a group of people, and at the very end, there's this little sound effect that's like a cha-ching. And then all the singers crack up. So it's like that's one of the reasons it's my favorite song because it gets me lighthearted about money. Because I didn't grow up where you were allowed to be lighthearted. Like it was very serious and it was hard, and we didn't talk about it a lot, which I think from our feedback from our listeners has been a lot of people's experience, especially as women, that in a lot of ways they just weren't taught how to do it. And so it's one of those topics that they either don't want to talk about or they're anxious or nervous about, or there's a lot of dread about it. Have you found that to be true in your work?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people seek me out when they've kind of keep running into the same brick wall, or maybe they're trying to attempt it and doing it on their own. They're just getting frustrated, or maybe they've even gone as far as to work with a professional and feel like they're not getting the type of response or sometimes even respect that they are looking for, so they can open up and be vulnerable when they're talking about their finances. So that is a really common theme. And there's even when and as you become more successful, it can sometimes be harder to ask for help. And I've noticed that a lot too, where people feel, embarrassed or shame or even prideful around it. Of like, hey, I'm successful. I'm kicking asses, at life. So how come I don't know this? And then now I have to raise my hand and tell other women or another person that I don't know how to do this. And, then everything's going to fall apart. And that's not true. And I think when people come to that realization, they're like, okay, it's time, let me go. And as they explore it, they realize many people have this same issue going on. And I think as much as we are being loud voices in the financial industry and in the world that women want more resources, it's still uncomfortable to talk about when you're with a group of friends. You have one camp where maybe you're doing very well and you're proud of yourself, but you don't want to come across like you're bragging. So you kind of keep it to yourself. And then there's the other camp where maybe you're not doing that great and you're in a period of time where you're relying on some credit cards and you're trying to like make it through, where you don't want to talk about that. And then there's every host in between of how we were brought up to talk about money. So I do think that it's common for people to be reserved when speaking about this.
Yes. No, go ahead. I'm listening.
I was just thinking, one of the reasons we wanted to have you on our show is your book, because first of all, we love superpowers. It's a thing.
Yeah, we do.
And in our first Women Connected Wisdom book, Dr. Joe Veazey
Yes.
talked about superpowers. So
Activating
when
them.
when we came across your work in the world and about investing as your superpower, both of us lit up. We were
Yeah.
like, ooh, tell us more. So tell us how you got into this and tell us about this book.
So I started in the financial industry fresh out of college, and the primary reason was growing up, I did kind of learn a behavior to be afraid of not having money. And I started hoarding money as soon as I started working. I would I had these cute little envelopes. I don't know where I got them from, but they were cute. They had little cartoons on them, and I would put different amounts of cash in different envelopes, and I would actually hide them in drawers. And as I got older, I don't think I recognized that it was odd behavior. I was just like, this is how I'm safe. I don't know what I was being safe from, but that's what I did. And then when I got to college and you kind of have to pick a career path, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was really interested in learning more about financial planning or money. I got an internship at Smith Barney, and it was such a different world, right? I was a college kid and I'm going there and everyone's wearing suits and it's really serious and they're talking about money and they're making investment decisions. And I was like, what is this? Like, what is this place? What are they doing? And then when I realized there was a layer behind it that involved financial planning, that really piqued my interest because I was coming from such a place of being afraid of losing money or being broke and not having anything. And understanding that there were strategies that existed to prevent that from happening and even help you build your wealth, I was like, I need to know more of that. And then every day was different, which was really exciting. I had a few internships in college, and one was at an insurance company, and I sat there, for 40 hours a week, I think during the summer, and I was like, this is not what I'm going to be able to do. You're going to, skip class. If you want to skip class, you get a slap on the wrist and then you go take a nap, and then you're going into an office for 40 hours and you're like, oh man. So working in the financial industry, I was up, like running around, walking around, learning different information. And I was like, this is exciting. I don't know what's going on, but it seems exciting to me. And I figured I should know this as a life skill. So whether this becomes a long-term career or not, nothing bad is going to happen by me learning this information. In fact, it's going to make me feel more confident when I make decisions going forward. So I made it as kind of like a life jacket, decision for my life to say I want to learn and more and lean into this. The book came about because as I was moving away from my career working with a big company and going out on my own, I wanted to provide one-on-one help, or I wanted to provide classes, but they're priced at a higher level because of the limited time that I had. And I didn't want to leave people hanging. I said, if people really want this information and they can't afford to work with me one-on-one, I want to create a book that they can refer to and do this on their own. Because as people would come to me and say, well, where can I get more resources? That was great information. I would go online. I'd kind of give them a path of you can check out this site and check out that site. But as I was doing it with them, it was a pop-up ad, another pop-up ad, enter your email, get more information, and you're getting spammed all over the place. It's distracting. If you're really
Right.
trying to understand information, you're kind of getting blown all over the place. So having the book, I wanted to create it where if somebody didn't really know what they were doing, how could they start from A to B to Z, C, D, all the things to really create their own financial plan. And if they also wanted to work with a professional, well, how do they know what questions to ask? When is a good time to work with a professional? Who should the professional be? What kind of company should I be looking at? And I kind of dive into all of those. So you can either do it on your own if you want to, or if you outsource it, you at least feel confident going into those conversations and knowing how to choose the right person to work with.
So important. So important of when knowing to ask the right question, right? Because again, organizing your receipts, like last year, I did a great job at keeping receipts. I was not organizing them by the month. So doing this huge chunk of admin work during the holiday season is not what you want to do. Maybe do that at a different time if you can plan it. And also, what I found as a business owner, trying to be a better customer of the experts that I reach out to, right? Like coming with questions, coming with their stuff as organized as possible, I found helps us be more effective. They enjoy working with me more. I'm not frustrated because I was unclear with what I was actually asking, right? So that's why I love how simple you make it in your book, because it makes sense. Maybe talking to you is not the first step they need. Maybe they can figure it out on their own. But like you said, if you've been doing that and you've been hitting this brick wall, I got you. We can work through it, but it's going to be more than the price of a book. And that's also financial wellness on your end too, right? Because like you said, of the time that you had available. And that's what we've been working through as we build our businesses, different time slots and how we value it.
Yeah, I think just getting on the path in the first place, I look at it like if you have a, you know, medical diagnosis that you need help with, you go to the doctor and they're
Right.
speaking basically a different language and then they leave.
Yes.
And you're like, I think I had questions. I kind of wrote some stuff down, but I don't really understand what's going on. And that happens in the financial world. So if you do meet with a professional, whether it's a financial planner or somebody at a bank, and they're giving you advice, you can question it if you don't really understand the foundation of where this is coming from, or you don't know what questions to ask. It might be the best advice anybody could ever give you, but you might not take it because you're going to go, well, I don't really feel good about this. I don't really understand what they're talking about, and this sounds risky. I'm just going to trust my gut and not do this. And we want to
Right.
get those out of the way so you can make confident, informed, educated decisions with your finances. And a lot of that is just understanding who you are, how you
Yes.
make financial decisions. And I think the more women can get involved with investing, the better it's going to serve you in the future,
So
because we need to create streams of income or buckets and buckets of money so we can eventually stop working and live on that. And you don't want that time to be the first time you're really truly understanding investing, because it's going to scare the crap out of you. You got to really go through that now, make mistakes now, learn from those mistakes, move forward, and everything you're learning is a building block to learning more advanced strategies. So you don't want to look at it right now like I have to learn everything. No one's asking you to become a financial professional and sit in my seat. You don't have to learn it all. You really don't. You just need the information for solving today's problems and kind of dabbling in some other things. And then they build on each other. After you build confidence there, then you're going to ask a deeper question. You're going to want to go deeper. Then you get that under your belt and you're like, okay, I get this. Well, what about my tax consequences in the future? What
mhm,
strategies can I do to build around that? And you don't have to jump into the deep end right away. So
right.
kind of taking baby steps along the way.
Yeah. And what came up for me when you said that is the miseducation of Lauren Hill, right? When I think about that title, and in my 20s, I would think about deconstructing how I was educated, right? And then reconstructing it, because that's what you're saying. This is where I was. I was a financial hoarder. And it's interesting. I don't think I would have said that I was a financial hoarder, Shinobu, but I think I was. I remember one time we moved out of this apartment in Powder Springs, this little city in Georgia, and I was packing all my stuff, and I found $1.50 here, and $1.50 here, and $1.50 here. I said, when did I put this money all over the place? And I was excited because I had so much money, but I said, I was just trying to get something at the candy lady's place, and I thought I had no money. So if you're going to put it up, you have to know where you put it and that it's working for you. It's not just sitting somewhere. So when you talk about empowered planning and intentionally laying out your financial plan, I've been studying insurance recently, right? And it's interesting to see the options that you have. And it answered the question for me when people would talk about insurance as to why they wouldn't say all the types of insurance that there is, because there's so many different types, right? Almost like people's bodies individually, we all need something different, and you have to know where you are to know what you need, depending on what your strategy is. Like you said, maybe your tax strategy might dictate what type of life insurance you have. So when you make it simple for people, if they get the book and they say, okay, I do need to sit with you one on one, right? I don't want to be in your seat, but I know I want you on the team. What does that look like to go to the next step with you? And how is it different than what you offer in the book?
It's different because it's catered to exactly what they're looking for. So I don't offer specific investment advice. So I'm not serving as a financial planner. It's in the coaching capacity
Yes.
because we have unique personalities around money. And one problem for somebody else might be, they have their money scattered everywhere. They don't really have a strategy. They're saving. They don't know if they should be saving more. They are investing. And it could be where we're working together and we come to a point where I'm like, you now need to work with a financial planner on specific investment strategies based on all of these things. But we don't necessarily know that ahead of time. Or if they go to a financial planner, the financial planners work differently than an attorney. If you go to an attorney and you're talking to them on the phone, they are just watching that clock and it's like, and more money and more money and more money. And you have to pay them for their time. And that's how they can offer advice, because they're being compensated for it. When you work with a financial planner, they're not being compensated for every 30 minutes you're working with them. They're getting compensated based on either products that they sell you or the total assets they have under management. So let's say you don't have a bunch of assets yet and you go to work with someone, they might just give you some like quick hits, like, okay, you can think about this, you can think about this. They're certainly not going to spend sessions with you because they can't. Again, it's their financial wellness. If they want to keep their job, they can't have a bunch of clients where they're not actually earning money from that. And there really isn't a model of, pay by the hour.
Right.
That doesn't exist. So this coaching is really starting from the beginning. What are they looking at? What are their goals? And I do discovery calls, and there's plenty of times where I'm like, I'm not the right person for you. You're kind of more advanced. You should just dive into working with the planner, or you need to work with somebody else that's going to focus on XYZ. But oftentimes when I'm at a tipping point where someone needs to work with, get specific recommendations, they're so confident going into those conversations, and they meet with that planner maybe once or twice and it's done. They're not meeting with them, going back and then doing nothing.
Right.
Because they're just like, there's shoving a lot of stuff at me. I think it sounded good, but also sounded risky. Like, it's not for me. They don't get me, and it's just kind of that model in that sense. So that's how I work with people, is really, what are you looking for? And let's make it happen.
Love it.
I noticed in your book how you start with like phase one, where you build up the foundation for financial empowerment. Like, you teach people, like just how we started the show today, about like, what is our baggage around money? Like, how do we unpack that? How do we go forward? So I love that you start in that place, because you start where your clients are. And what's blocking us from this, right? Because usually there's something that's like, whoa, we got to look at this in order to go forward. So I love that. And we often talk on the show about knowing your numbers. So that caught my attention. That's one of your chapters in your book.
Yeah, I think the emotional element just comes up all the time. Anytime you're making a big financial decision, if you're buying a house, selling a house, going into business for yourself, if you're, buying a car, anything that comes up, you're going to have your own emotional bias that comes into play. And it's, do you know how to handle it? Do you know what's a real barrier coming up, that there's actual true risk involved? Or is it just fear? Is it, and why is the fear there? So really understanding how to work through that so you can make investing your superpower. Because unless you want to just keep working yourself into the ground, you need to leverage the money that you're making to make money on your behalf. Otherwise, there's just not enough, I guess, of money out there to work and save it, put it in cash, and then use it when you retire. You'll run out of it. So you need to learn how to do that. And you got to figure out how your personality will deal with that. And it's important to just be in touch with your emotions in that.
Yes. And I don't think that we have a lot of conversations like that, right? Finding purpose. We talk about purpose and work-life balance and what our work is and what our personal life is. But we're spending time how we spend time right now, right? In the long term, 20 years, 40 years, how do you want to spend your time? When I was studying for the insurance, it was talking about the way they calculate the age that certain things are going to be paid out, right? And so if the expected age of retirement, the normal age is 65, if I plan on retiring at 45, we're going to talk about how to do that, right? And then I live to 93, that's a lot of years to cover. Where is this money coming from, right?
Yeah.
Something that I've been looking at is the back of these credit cards they've been sending me. And I was waiting for when it would reach past 30% that they were going to charge me in this what is it called, the interest rate to charge on the back end, and it finally passed 30%. So again, the way I look at it is if they're trying to charge 30%, and on some credit cards you might get back 1, 2, 3%, you absolutely need to be getting a higher return for your money. Even if you're working for somebody else and you may not have the capacity to work for yourself, it's very important to know the plan, and again, to be empowered. If you feel like you need support being empowered, absolutely start there. If you're empowered and still don't know what to do, start at the next step. That's what we're talking about. But I think that we absolutely cannot afford to not invest because of the percentages, because of inflation, with where everything is going. And I would love for us to talk more about the cost of living and how you usually address that situation from a general standpoint. Of course, there's tailored ways to talk about it, and day-to-day expenses with where we are with the economy right now.
Yeah, I think really examining what your numbers are is a good place to start. So I typically have people write down what they think they spend on a monthly basis and just start there. Just write down whatever number comes to your head and then actually go through the exercise of seeing what that number is. And at the end of that, just do a quick check in. Was I close to that number? Am I way off? Am I spending way less than I thought I was spending? Am I spending way more? And just being in touch with that and then seeing on a regular basis, do I like to do this myself, where I'm plugging in these, or do I want to use an app just to kind of do a quick check in of where I'm at? But understanding where you're spending money on and where your money is going is so important, because when you transition to retirement, oftentimes if somebody's like, okay, we spend typically about 100,000 a year. Okay. And then a year later they come in and I go, okay, well, you actually withdrew 130,000 last year. And they're like, oh, well, that was because we had to to put on a new roof, but that was a one-time thing. We're not going to do that again. And it's like, okay, so we're going to keep modeling in. You're spending 100,000 a year. The next year they come in. So this is year 2. It's like you spent 145,000 last year. Oh, well, my granddaughter got married and then we wanted to pay for a vacation for everybody to go on and this. And then the third year. And it's like, you guys, you're spending $140,000 a year.
Right.
You can tell me to my face how much you're spending, but I got all your accounts. I can look at it. You're spending that much money. And then when you do those different calculations, it can drastically change the outcome in the future. So for you to understand how much you're really spending, you can get realistic with how much you can save. Well, then how much can you invest? What do you have in your emergency fund? Like making sure you have these layers set up. So if you do want to go into business for yourself, then we might say, okay, let's have about 6 months worth of your expenses put aside in cash. If you're a little worried about recession or we're thinking about inflation, maybe we want to do 12 to 18 months. Well, how much is that number? We don't want you to pull it out of thin air. We want you to look at those numbers and say, okay, this is how much money I need. Based on how much I can save, it's going to take me 2 years to get to that number, but I can do it if I automate my savings and do that. So it's really important to understand where those numbers are. And then also just to see, like with inflation, we were talking about this a little bit earlier before we hopped on the live.
Yeah.
They'll use, core inflation numbers. They'll use CPI, and at times they're not including food and gas because those prices can fluctuate. Well, like, what do we care, right? I just care about how much money I'm spending. It's like I'm not studying economics and writing a textbook on that. Right. I want to know: am I spending more money than I was yesterday? If I'm buying all of the exact same things. And if that's the case, we have to adjust our budgets towards that. So, in general, these kind of golden rules that you have is you shouldn't be spending more than 50% on your essential expenses. So that's like your food, your mortgage, your, utilities, those kind of things. And maybe that was the case 3 years ago that you were doing that, but maybe now you've creeped up to 65, 70%. You really want to get in touch with what do those numbers look like for me today? And if you are spending a lot more than that, it's taking away from how much money you can spend on obviously fun things, but also saving. So you just want to get this, check in with yourself to say, where am I at? Am I in between these guardrails? If not, maybe I got to pick up a second job as a side hustle. There's lots of different things you can do now, like food delivery services, there's pet sitting, there's house sitting, like stuff that's not super labor intensive that you could do. But maybe you have to get a roommate or Airbnb out part of your house just to kind of do that, give yourself that cushion room. If you don't do it, what are the long-term consequences or impact on that? Of really understanding what that means. If you're not able to save today, what does that mean for the future? And really stopping to thinking about that. So I think as tough as it is right now to see prices just continue to increase and it's putting a strain, we also have to take care of our future self and say
Right.
we can't just like, we call it like the ostrich effect, where you just bury your head in the sand and you're just like, I'm
Mhm.
not going to pay attention to it and I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. But to
Mhm.
pay it, just look at that, because if otherwise, like, who's going to take care of it in the future for you?
Right. And
Right.
so I have a question about your suggested ratio between saving and investing. Do you have a percentage you usually
Not
advise?
really a percentage. I would
Mhm.
look at, do you have an emergency fund? If you
Mm.
don't have an emergency fund, I would look at putting money in there. And then once you have an emergency fund, I would save. So you'd want to try to save about 15 to 20% of your money. So whether that's going into an emergency fund or going into an investment, that's really up to you, depending on where you're at. And as people get closer to retirement, they might narrow their focus to say, I'm only saving for retirement. If you're 20, 30 years away from retirement, it might be like, I want to put my kids through college, at least pay for a couple of years of college. I also want to save for retirement. I know I'm going to need a new car in 6 years. You have to be really saving for a lot of these things. You can be investing in all of those. It's just, you might say, 10% is going to go to retirement, 10% is going to go to college, and 10% is going to go, somewhere else. But you
Yeah.
really have to just stay in touch with those numbers. And I would, at least at a minimum, sit down with your savings or investment goals at least once a quarter to say, can I do any more? If I can't do any more, am I happy with where I'm at? Do I want to move the needle? What, just kind of do a temperature check of where you are.
I love that, a temperature check. And I'm thinking about this projected 100,000 and they spent 135 and 145. And I get how sometimes in those situations when we do it, it's like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, right? But then throughout the year, you felt the stress of that. And you're like, but why? It's only this much, or it's only this little thing, but really it's 33% more. It's not just a little bit, it's a whole third more than that you had in miscellaneous in your mind. So when we step back and look at the numbers and see what we need, um, it makes sense. It makes sense to do it on a quarterly check-in. I like that for the temperature check.
And
And
then, maybe
50%
in the
for
beginning,
essentials.
you do it more than that. And I
That
say
makes
that
sense.
so you can desensitize yourself to looking at the numbers. If you just do it once a quarter and you're dreading it and you're
Mhm.
like, I don't want to sit here and look at how much money I've spent, and it just kind of doesn't feel good, do it more. It sounds
Yeah, I had to do that.
counterintuitive, but
Mm.
do it more.
Yeah, it's
Make
true.
it like a little fun date that you do with your spouse or your partner, or you have a
Yeah.
friend, and just be like, we're going to go do this. And I tell people to like plan something fun after,
Hmm.
Mhm.
so you just start to associate it with like, I did this and now we're going out and we're doing something fun, or we're going on a hike, or we're doing like a family thing after we do it. So it's not this like yucky thing that you have to sit down and do. And the more you do it, the less you're going to care, because
Yeah.
you're just like, this is just part of my routine, part of my habit. I'm used to this. It's kind of like, if you haven't been to the gym or you haven't hiked. I know after I had my son, it was like maybe he was 6 months old. My
Yeah.
girlfriend moved to Alaska. She'd been living there. She's like, come, I'm like house sitting this beach house in Alaska. There's whales
Beautiful.
outside. Like, you need to come here now. And I went and she took me on this crazy hike, and I was having fun, but I'm like, these girls are moving fast. Like,
Yeah.
these are outdoors people.
Yeah.
And the next day I couldn't walk down the stairs. I was in
Mhm.
so much pain. And I told them, I was like, oh, it hurts when I walk downstairs. And they were all like, haha. I'm like, no, like it really,
Really
really
hurt.
hurts. I'm in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
So again, if like, they're hiking a couple times a week, it's
Right.
nothing for them. And it's the same thing where you just want to build those muscles. And the more you do it and even can talk about it, you don't have to be specific, the more other people around you are going to pick up those healthy habits as well. So you're helping yourself,
Mhm.
you're helping your community, even your family. If you have children, they can see that you're doing this and it's not a big deal, but it's important to you.
Yeah.
It just really has this kind of trickle down effect for everybody.
I love that. And I can definitely speak to that. We talk about the profit first system throughout our different episodes in the seasons, and that is on the 10th and the 25th. And I was getting to a point where I felt like the work wasn't done or I wasn't getting everything done in the time blocks that I was blocking off. So now on my checklist, I have to look at the accounts. You should look at it every day, know where your numbers are. Um, Robert Kiyosaki in his book talks about how A students, sometimes when they're bad with money, are like bad students that don't want to look at their report card. And I was never like that with my grades. But the money, when it's good, it's fine. And then when it's sliding, it's like, oh, I don't want to look. So that's what I've added into my habits, and it's really helped.
Shinobu, what would you say to our listeners who, maybe this is new for them? Like talking about saving 15 to 20% and talking about investing. Where what's their first step?
Really diving into the numbers. And if that's too yucky, if they're like, I don't want to start there, just start with what you want. What do you want? What if you could paint a picture of everything that you wanted? What does that look like? And it could be very different for your best friend. So just look
Mhm.
at like, what do I want? I want to retire at whatever age. I want to have my house paid off. I want to travel. And I don't care if you think it sounds ridiculous. Like, write it all down because it's actually not ridiculous, right? It's only because most of us aren't human calculators, that we're not running, projections behind the scenes. But once you put it all down and you dive into my book, you might be able to do all of it. You might not be able to do it in the exact time frame that you want, but it might be 5 years later that you can do all of that. So just really
Right.
figuring out what it is, because once you figure out what you want, it's more exciting to look at your numbers, to say, well,
Mhm.
how am I going to get there? And is it possible for me to get there? Is this realistic? If it's not realistic, wouldn't you want to know now instead of 15 years from now where you're like, oops, I set myself up
Right.
and it's not realistic anymore? And you can just play with it and have fun with it. And you can start with a creative activity first. And then you can kind of ease yourself into, okay, now that I know and I kind of set this vision, for what I want, let's move forward of actually now, how do I get it? And I think that many people can think of a scenario that they've done that themselves. I grew up
Mhm.
in New Jersey with the cold winters, and the last winter I lived there, I had an apartment and there was no assigned spots. So I would wake up at like 5:30 and shovel myself out because I didn't want to be all sweaty when I got to work. So I'd shovel my spot out, go take a shower, come back down in all my nice work clothes, and then the plow would come and like, push you back in. So I was like, all right, I got to do this. Go to work all day, come home, and somebody would have taken the spot that I shoveled out, and then I had I had to shovel myself into a spot. And I was like,
Mhm.
I'm out of here. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. It was a terrible winter. And once I had my mindset that I wanted to move, that's the first step. That's like the fun vision of, I want to move to Southern California. Like, that's where I'm going to go. How am I? Then it's like, well, how do I get there? Right. And you
Mhm.
got to like plan those things out. And once you plan those out, 6 months later, I was there. But I didn't just
Beautiful.
like
Well
move.
done.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But, and that was probably 13 years ago. So
Yeah.
I think anybody can look at that, whether it's like a trip they wanted to go on or a job they wanted. It's like, you got there and you made it happen. And it's the same thing with your finances. You just have to figure out the how to's. But the first is just that vision planning. And then we can do it. If you love the numbers, then dive into the numbers first.
Yeah.
Or if you're like me and you like the magazines and the glue sticks, dive into the visioning. And
Mhm.
then that inspires me to do my numbers, like when I have my vision board or what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, it gets
Absolutely.
exciting then. It gets more real.
Right?
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah. So every week we do a wisdom in action, and it's an action step around the dimension that we're talking about, right? So for financial wellness, Shinobu, what are you doing for yourself this week?
This week, I
Yeah.
am buying myself lunch, is what I'm doing.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. I love it. I love it. We were talking about going out to eat earlier. I'm not buying myself lunch. I am making myself lunch at home. So we bought it from the farmer's market, right? I love that for you. Okay. What about yours, Christine? You want to go next or you want me to go next?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned at the beginning, I am kind of going to take a pause and look at where I'm at. Like I've been traveling a lot of things have been going on. So I'm
Yeah.
going to evaluate my numbers. And so I'm going to do that, know my numbers. is with my hashtag wisdom in action,
I
and do
love
a
that.
financial date with my husband because we
Ooh,
like to do financial dates on Sunday afternoons. And so, because I haven't been here, we haven't done that. And it needs to happen.
I love it. Know the numbers, and I have the financial dates.
Hmm.
Okay, let's see. Where is my hashtag? I have a couple of them written down, but I think it's hashtag consistently checking in, right? You were
Mm-hmm.
talking about door dashing, and I did start door dashing again. So you ladies know we have listeners, right? So we've been talking about it, right? Shinobu, I saved the 6 months of expenses to be in the businesses. We did good. It is September. So we're dashing for a second and also have other projects, volume three, different things we're excited about. And I'm just glad to know that I need to look at the financial plan, right? And when I'm studying this insurance, something that came up yesterday was about Social Security, right? And it was talking about how they want you to work for 10 years, right? So putting into Social Security for 10 years. And if you have not been working the last 5 years, then you will not get Social Security. That's very important for me to know, for millennials to know as we jump from different jobs. Absolutely. Be intentional about your financial wellness, occupational wellness. But if you're expecting certain things to kick in at a certain time, remember to plan for yourself too, because the way that we move might make our options different, and we can, instead of getting there and realizing, ooh, I should have considered all this stuff, we can be proactive and, have better relationships with our finances and be intentional now. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you
that
so much.
knowing things like that. I think that's a great thing to know, Shannon, for entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and people that are doing gig work or contract work.
Hmm.
I was looking up while we were talking the average lifespan of Americans right now.
What is it right now?
It's like 79.11 months, so right under 80 years old. So it's actually gone down a little bit. So that's interesting. But thinking about if you're living 80 years, if you're living, and I'm sure Shinobu, you've had these conversations with your clients, like how long are you living? And what do you want to be doing? Like, do you want to be traveling the world at 80 years old? Like, what do you want to be doing? And that dream. I love starting with the dream and what do
Me
we want it
too.
to look like.
And
Yeah,
that
it's
makes
funny because
sense.
I think when you're younger, you think about living till 100 or
Yeah.
Hmm.
whatever the age is, and you just think it's hilarious. But I have to tell you, people that are retiring that are 65 also think it's hilarious. Like they're
Hmm.
like, "There's no way I'm going to make it there," And then I would have clients that were 98 driving themselves in, like totally healthy, and they're just like, "My nobody wants to hang out with me. All my friends are gone, and my kids don't." They're kind of making jokes, but it's
Yeah.
still like it can happen, and you don't really
Yes.
imagine yourself at that age, but it happens all the time.
Right?
Yes.
If we're so lucky,
If
right?
we're
If we're so
intentional about the
lucky.
wellness, right, and do what we can, and then the rest is out of our hands.
Yeah.
So super
Shinobu,
happy.
if people want to reach you, if they want to connect with you, what's the best way to connect with you?
I would head to my website, empoweredplanning.com, and sign up for my newsletter. I think that's the best way to kind of get a feel for a little bit more about what I offer and who I am, and just kind of more of what's available.
Right? And we're going to put that info in our show notes, and we will put a link to your book so folks can get your book and find out how to connect with you and hire you if they want to, but also just to read this how to, like how to do this and make investing your superpower. So it is definitely a step by step guide on how to do it. So thank you for your work in your world. Thank you for coming to
Yes.
talk to us and being connected. We appreciate you and everything you're doing to help women
Yes.
in the world.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Appreciate you guys having me on here. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Had a great time. Thank you. Ooh, so good.
So good. It just makes me think, right? I'm like, ooh,
Percolating.
I got to go back and look at this or do this or,
Hmm.
that's been up for me a lot lately because what I've been going through is like, okay, what are the details that need
Yeah,
to be looked at and handled? So,
me too.
yeah, very
And
cool.
yeah, like we were talking about in South Carolina at the book signing I brought up earlier, just your chapter, going back to the basics.
Mhm.
We might not
Mhm.
be advanced, we might not be two PhDs in and all this stuff, but we know that come to the basics, and taking a
Mhm.
deep breath. And again, I think about Cecile. She says they're just numbers, numbers. I
Right.
could put some numbers
Right.
together,
You could put some numbers together.
Yeah.
Well, and I love that, that is what Shinobu said for the first
Mm,
step is to know your numbers. That's going
okay.
back to the basics. Like,
Hmm.
what are you currently spending and where are you saving and what? I
Yeah.
love that. Speaking about book signings,
Yes, yes. So, guys, right now it is September 20th, 2023. If you're listening to this live or on Friday, it's this week, right? We have a book signing on Saturday at the Owl Attic. Am I saying that right?
Hoot Owl. I
The
think
Who
it's the Hoot
Owl.
Owl
The
Attic.
Who
Yeah.
Owl Attic, yes. The Who Owl Attic is a bookstore in Sandy Springs. We're going to have that information on our social media, Instagram, LinkedIn. So stay tuned to make sure that you're following our page so you can get all the information. Again, in volume one, we have 18 authors. So we'll see who gets to come down to Atlanta, who in Atlanta is going to be able to show up and have an afternoon of bonus with you guys. But we've been having a really good time at the book signing, sharing stories and listening to the people who have read the book or interested in reading it. So it's been amazing. We have that
And
coming up
connecting with our listeners. Yeah.
and connecting with the listeners. And we also have more opportunities for you guys to connect. We know we have people from around the world. So next month, we have our second annual Women Connected in Wisdom Conference. So if you
Mhm.
want to go deeper into these conversations, you're like, it was great for an hour, but I need a little bit more and need some more resources in the different dimensions. We're going to have that for you towards the end of next month. And we'll be able to put that up on social media so you guys can follow and get all the information you need. But I think that is everything for episode 130. What do you think?
Whoop, whoop. I
I
think we
think I'm
did it.
good. Okay. Okay, guys. Thank you so much for joining us for Financial Wellness. We'll be back live at 5 next week. In the meantime, be well, be wise, be whole. Peace.